Welcome back to the deep dive. So last time we dug into the Jamaican agricultural market report for the week ending April 19th.
Right. And the main thing was that overall picture looked pretty neutral, kind of stable even.
Yeah, but underneath things were definitely moving. We saw red sweet pepper, salad tomato, honeydew, yam. They were all climbing.
Oh, well, green cabbage, yellow
Yeah.
sweet pepper, sweet potatoes, string beans, they were heading down.
And green sweet pepper was, well, it was on both lists depending on where you looked, which was a bit confusing.
A bit of a head scratcher, yeah.
Yeah.
But overall, moderate volatility, kind of
Yeah.
average market movement.
Exactly. It really showed how you need to look past the headlines, you know.
For sure. Even a stable average can hide a lot of action.
Okay, so that sets us up nicely for this week's deep dive. We're looking at the report for the week ending April 26th, 2025.
And the headline number here is interesting. The average price across all 60 commodities barely budged, down just 0.13%. Tiny.
Almost flat. And this is the kicker, the average volatility. How much prices jumped around?
Yeah.
That shot up. Way up to 34.26%. That's high.
Whoa. Okay, so average price is steady, but individual items are bouncing all over the place. Much more active market this week.
Precisely. So our mission today is to really get under the hood of that. What's driving those big swings? Where are the big shifts compared to last week?
And what opportunities or, risks does that create for you if you're involved in this market?
All right. Let's jump straight into the winners then. Which commodities saw the biggest price increases?
Okay, top of the list. Sweet pepper, the red variety, a really significant jump of 15.0%.
15%. Wow. That brings it to what, Jay, $944.17 per kilo?
That's right. And what's really key here is this comes after a strong gain last week, too. Remember, it was up nearly 13% then.
Ah, good point. So that's not just a one-off spike. That's real sustained upward momentum.
Definitely suggests strong demand, doesn't it? Maybe domestic, maybe even some export interest, pulling that price up consistently.
Makes sense. Okay, who's next?
Next up, green banana. Another substantial jump, 14.00%. Price is now, Jay, $269.04 per kilo.
Green banana. Wasn't that one really volatile last week as well?
It was extremely volatile. We noted volatility around, was it 66% last week?
So even with those wild swings previously, the trend this week is clearly upwards. Strong upwards.
Yeah. What's driving it? Well, the report sort of hints at maybe increased demand from the processing sector.
Ah, okay. So not just for fresh eating, but maybe things like banana chips or flour, that kind of thing.
Could be. If those industries are buying more, that would definitely push the price.
Interesting angle. All right, what else gained?
Then we've got tomato, the Plummy variety, a notable rise, 10.72%, landing at $245.36 per kilo.
Okay, another tomato doing well. Seems like a good time for tomato growers.
It does seem that way.
Yeah.
And supporting that idea, tomato salad also continued climbing, up 9.51% this week.
And that builds on last week's gain too, right?
Yep, it was up over 7% last week. So salad tomatoes are now at $458.92 per kilo. Consistent strength there.
Definitely a positive trend for tomatoes overall.
Seems like it. And rounding out our top 5 gainers, Gungo Peas, the green ones.
Yeah.
A solid gain of 6.67%.
And the price on those.
Pretty premium. Jay, $2,004.44 per kilogram.
Wow, over $2,000 a kilo? That really stands out.
It does. Gungo Peas often hold that higher value niche, and this just confirms it.
So, okay, looking at these top gainers, red sweet pepper, green banana, both tomatoes, Gungo Peas.
What's the story?
Well, it looks like strong, possibly growing demand for key items. The peppers and tomatoes feel like staples showing strength. The green banana jump, possibly linked to processing, is a key insight.
And Gungo Peas just maintaining that premium status.
Yeah.
These definitely seem like the hot spots in the market right now.
Agreed. Areas to potentially focus on. Now, let's flip the coin. What about the commodities that saw the biggest price decreases?
All right, leading the way down this week was hot pepper, the Scotch Bonnet variety. A pretty significant drop, minus 8.16%.
Ouch. Where does that put the price?
And a J, $12.60 per kilo. And importantly, it's still showing high volatility around 46%.
So price down and still very unpredictable. That's tough for anyone dealing in Scotch bonnets. Oversupply, maybe?
That's often the reason, yeah. More supply hitting the market than demand can soak up.
Yeah,
And the volatility suggests the market's still, finding its level.
makes sense. What else dropped?
Cantaloupe
Yeah.
saw a notable drop of 7.01%, putting it at J and $46.34 per kilo.
Cantaloupe. We don't really flag that last week, did we? So this is a newer trend.
Yeah, it is. Could be seasonal, perhaps. Maybe peak demand is over, or just a surge in supply coming in. Hard to say for sure from just this data point.
True. Okay. Thyme.
The Thyme, a considerable decrease there, minus 6.34%. Price fell to $20.33.89 per kilo.
That's quite a dip for thyme. It often seems pretty steady.
It does. This might suggest a glut, perhaps. Maybe a really good harvest hitting the market all at once.
A definite possibility. Oversupply relative to immediate need. Okay, what else?
Sweet pepper, the green one. Another decrease here, down 5.56% to $903.61 per kilo.
Right, and green sweet pepper was the one showing those mixed signals last week. Some up, some down regionally.
Exactly. So this overall drop suggests that maybe those localized factors pushing prices up last week have faded, and the broader trend is now, downwards.
The market's settling, maybe? Okay, one more.
Yep, Escallion, another drop, minus 5.42%, price at $569.87 per kilo. And like Scotch Bonnet, it's also showing high volatility,
How high?
about 51%. So another one with falling prices and lots of instability.
Not a great combination. So, Scotch Bonnet, Cantaloupe, Thyme, green sweet pepper, Escallion. These are the areas seeing some weakness.
Seems like it. Shifts in supply, maybe softening demand. Definitely areas where you want to be careful about holding too much stock.
Good point. Now, you mentioned volatility several times. Let's specifically look at the most volatile commodities this week, the real wild card.
Right. Top of the volatility chart, cabbage, the green variety, still extremely volatile at 61.05%.
61%, even though its price barely changed this week, up only 0.5% or so.
Exactly. Which is really interesting because remember last week it had that massive price drop, but was also highly volatile then too.
So cabbage is just all over the place. Price swings wildly, even if the net change week to week is small sometimes, makes planning incredibly tough.
Absolutely. Huge uncertainty there. Next, as we mentioned, green banana, still highly volatile at nearly 60%, 59.88%.
But that came with a big price increase this week, the 14% jump we talked about.
Right, so big swings, but this week they resolved upwards. High risk, but potentially high reward if you time it right. You need to be nimble.
Definitely. Who else is on the volatile list?
The Escallion. Again, we saw its price drop, and its volatility remains high at 51.15%. Continued instability, downward price pressure.
One to watch very closely then.
Then there's Choi. High volatility at 48.95%, and its price decreased too by about 4.34%.
Okay, Choi down and volatile.
And lastly, hot pepper, the West Indian red type. Still volatile at around 48.91%, and it also saw a price decrease of about 5%.
So quite a few key items showing really high volatility. Cabbage, green banana, Escallion, Choi, West Indian red pepper.
Yeah, it suggests there's quite a bit of, nervousness or uncertainty in the market for these specific items. Could be weather worries, supply chain hiccups, demand shifts. Lots of potential factors.
And for anyone dealing with these, risk management becomes absolutely critical.
Paramount. You need strategies to handle those unpredictable swings.
Okay, so pulling all this together, the gainers, the losers, the volatile ones, what practical recommendations could we offer listeners based on this week's data?
Well, looking at the momentum, a buy-in strategy, maybe focusing efforts or building some inventory, could make sense for red sweet pepper, green banana, and plummy tomato. The trend looks strong upwards, at least for now.
Okay, potential opportunities there. And on the flip side, where should people maybe pull back or be cautious?
Given the price drops, perhaps a reduced stock approach for Scotch Bonnet, Cantaloupe, and Thyme. The market signals suggest weakening demand or maybe oversupply, so holding too much could be risky.
Got it. Any regional pointers this week?
The report did mention Manchester specifically having good supply status overall. That can make it an interesting area, maybe a good sourcing point or distribution hub, depending on your needs.
That specific local info can be gold. And dealing with that high volatility, particularly in something like green banana.
Yeah, for those really volatile ones, you need to actively manage risk. Things like exploring forward contracts to lock in a price ahead of time, or maybe using tiered pricing based on how much someone buys or when they take delivery. Options to smooth out the bumps.
Smart strategies are key there. So let's step back for the bigger picture. What's driving all these complex movements?
It's that constant interplay, isn't it? Supply and demand fundamentals are always there. Then you layer on potential export factors boosting demand for some things.
In seasonality, like we speculated with Cantaloupe.
Exactly. Availability changes through the year. And looking ahead, especially in the Caribbean context, You absolutely cannot ignore the approaching hurricane season.
Ah, yes. That always casts a shadow, doesn't it?
It does. Just the anticipation of potential disruptions to farming, to transport, that alone can inject a lot of uncertainty and volatility into the market. People start trying to hedge their bets.
So everyone needs to be thinking about adaptation and strategic planning, especially with that on the horizon.
Absolutely, it's a dynamic landscape.
Okay, so let's try to wrap up the main insights from this week's deep dive.
I think the key thing is don't be fooled by that tiny average price change. Minus 0.13% sounds like nothing happened.
But really, underneath that, there were significant winners and losers. Red sweet pepper, green banana, tomatoes moving strongly up.
Contrasted sharply by Scotch Bonnet, Cantaloupe, Thyme heading down, and that persistent high volatility in things like green cabbage and green banana, even if the price direction varied.
It really hammers home the point. You have to look at the individual commodities. The overall average just doesn't tell a story you need for making actual decisions.
Exactly. Those commodity-specific signals are where the actionable insights are. That's what you need to track.
So, as a final thought for you, our listeners, to maybe mull over, how do these weekly ups and downs, this underlying volatility, how might that influence longer-term thinking about agricultural investment in Jamaica?
Yeah, what kind of strategies do you need, not just for next week, but for the next few years, to navigate this kind of dynamic market successfully? Especially when you factor in bigger picture risks like climate change, more extreme weather.
Right. And thinking very practically, based on this week's information we just discussed, the gainers, the losers, the volatility, the regional note. What's one concrete step you could take right now to better position yourself for the coming weeks in this constantly shifting market? Something to think about.